But you I will kill.
But you can't, Doctor. I am already dead.
Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and murderous widowers. I'm Noah Hook, and today we're looking at the abominable Dr. Phibes. This 1971 horror comedy from Britain takes place in the 1920s and follows the titular Dr. Phibes, an eccentric organist seeking revenge on a group of medical professionals involved in his wife's death. She died on the operating table, and in his rush to get to her, he crashed his car and was presumed dead. He's alive, but he's a little fucked up now. With the help of his mute assistant Volnavia, he is hunting the surgeons down one by one and killing them with bizarre methods inspired by the biblical plagues. The film began as a script collaborated on by writers James Whitten of Murder by Phone and William Goldstein of The Amazing Dobermans. It was purchased by American International Pictures, a company within MGM who thought it was a good fit for their golden goose Vincent Price. Robert Fuest of films like And Soon the Darkness and The Devil's Reign was brought in to direct, but he also rewrote most of the script. And as it was planned, this film does in fact star Vincent Price. For those unfamiliar, Price was an absolute force in the filmmaking industry between the 1940s all the way to the 80s. His career has spanned all genres, but he found a special home within horror. Just a few of his classic films include House of Wax, The Fly, House on Haunted Hill, The Tingler, Witchfinder General, and House of Usher. He is truly a horror legend, and I'm shocked it's taken me this long to cover one of his films on the channel. But he's far from the only star here, with Dr. Phibes also featuring Joseph Cotten from Citizen Kane and The Third Man, Peter Jeffrey from Midnight Express and The Return of the Pink Panther, Virginia North from Deadlier Than the Male and Some Girls Do, Hugh Griffith from Ben-Hur and How to Steal a Million, and Terry Thomas from Things to Come and Don't Look Now or Being Shot At. The cinematography was handled by Norman Warwick of The Creeping Flesh and Dr. Jekyll and Mrs. Hyde, and the score was composed by Basil Kirchin of I Start Counting and The Mutations. The abominable Dr. Phibes was met with pretty good reviews when it came out, and its love has only grown through the years thanks to its great set pieces and its campy vibes. It currently has an 88 and 75% on Rotten Tomatoes, along with a strong 3.6 on Letterboxd. Thank you so much to my patron Nitpicks for requesting Dr. Phibes for me to review. It had been on my watch list for a while, but before covering it here, I had never seen it before. And shout out to Dr. Phibes for being the new oldest movie I've covered on the channel, beating out Sisters by just 1 year. But with all of that said, it's probably time we get started. You may want to keep an eye out for locusts this evening, because we're watching the abominable Dr. Phibes. The movie opens on a masked figure who welcomes us in with some spooky organ playing. Spoiler alert, that is in fact the abominable Dr. Phibes. He's also a bit of a maestro, and I think he's inspired me to buy my own at-home animatronic swing band. He dances throughout his humongous ballroom with a woman dressed in white before descending a mysterious cage down to a lower level. His assistant Volnavia delivers it to the home of a doctor who wakes to find himself surrounded by some deadly fruit bats. Apparently they kill him. The doctor's bloodless body is found the next day, and Phibes places a necklace on one of 10 busts in his home. Inspector Trout is quite puzzled by a bunch of tropical bats suddenly appearing in Britain.
Ooh, they're nasty looking little blighters, aren't they?
Seen them in Mandalay. It's like your throat dry, they want.
And Sergeant Shenley informs him that another doctor was recently killed by a bunch of bees. Could there be a connection? Back at home, Dr. Phibes puts on his face and hair, and we won't get to see what's underneath until near the end of the film. He makes his way to this insane-looking masquerade party, where a Dr. Hargraves is unfortunate enough to introduce himself. Looks like Phibes gave this guy a mask of his own design, which continuously tightens until his throat is cut and he's totally beheaded inside of it. Another dead doctor, another wax head getting torched. And you might think I'm skipping some exposition or something. I'm really not. The kills really just start and we're thrown into the deep end with them. The next victim is Dr. Longstreet, who Phibes mailed a sexy, snaky film reel. The doctor's perversions are interrupted by Volnavia, who uses her seductive good looks to tie him to his chair. Phibes makes his way in and takes a vial of his blood. Shenley has figured out that all of the dead doctors worked for another doctor named Vesalius. Trout visits the train-loving doctor and his son Lem, and Vesalius is concerned when he learns his colleagues have been killed. We rejoin poor Dr. Longstreet, who is just about bloodless at this point. In all seriousness, any kind of death that involves slow blood loss terrifies me. Trout gets a call for a fourth dead doctor as Longstreet has been completely sucked dry. The investigators find one of Phibes' necklaces at the crime scene, which he left behind by accident. Trout brings it to the metalsmith that fabricated the piece, who shares that it is in a set of 10 unique amulets. He also shares that a beautiful young woman ordered them, but all he can remember is that she was quiet and fashionable. His final nugget of info is that the symbol on the amulet is Hebrew. Then Trout takes it to a rabbi who explains that it is the symbol for blood coming from the 10 plagues of Egypt in the Old Testament. These plagues are described in the book of Exodus. Each of these disasters were a form of punishment for Egyptian pharaohs who refused to free their Israelite slaves. The film plays a bit fast and loose with these plagues, but they are Phibes' interpretation of them, so I don't think it's a really big deal. In the film, the order of curses is as follows: boils, aka bees, bats, frogs, blood, rats, hail, beasts, locusts, death of the firstborn, and finally, darkness. Back at home, Phibes admires a photo of the woman he was dancing with in the opening, which tells us that she might not have actually been there.
9 killed you, 9 shall die, and be returned your loss.
Vesalius has gone through all of his surgical records from the past 5 years, and there was only one case where he worked with all of the now dead doctors. The patient's name was Victoria Phibes, who died on the operating table. So yeah, Victoria was Anton's wife, and he is seeking revenge on the 9 doctors and nurses who were operating on her when she died. Turns out Victoria made a turn for the worse while Anton was in Switzerland, and as he rushed back, his car went careening off of a cliff. Anton supposedly burned to death, and he was even buried with Victoria. They come to the conclusion that some madman has become obsessed with this case for some reason and wants to kill the 5 remaining doctors, but they have no idea who they're looking for. Meanwhile, Volnavia is feigning car trouble to get the attention of their next victim, who is met by Phibes and this little musical boy. Shenley has successfully located all but one of the remaining 5 doctors, who we can safely assume is the fella currently being killed. All of the money from the Phibes' Swiss bank account was transferred to a woman in England after their death, but he's not sure who this woman is. But she matches the description of the woman that the metalsmith met as well. That night, Trout is brought to the newest crime scene, in which Dr. Hedgepark has somehow been frozen to death inside of his car. Burn, Waxman, burn! While Vesalius' son Lem is reading music, he accidentally discovers that Phibes was a well-known organist, and the owner of a concert hall hints that he may not be dead. The next day, he and Trout visit the mausoleum that Mr. and Mrs. Phibes are supposedly buried in. There are ashes within Anton's coffin, but Trout isn't convinced they don't belong to his chauffeur that also died in the crash. This idea gains even more traction when they realize Victoria's body has been taken. Through a machine that assists his vocal cords, Phibes speaks to his dearly departed and declares the vicious mission of revenge he is going to complete. Superintendent Waverly breaks bad on Trout and the other investigators to catch this serial killer. Good luck with that, fellas. The next victim is Dr. Kitai, who just so happens to be going for a little flight. Shenley is rushing towards the airfield, but Phibes and Volnavia are already there to watch the fireworks. He's unable to catch the plane before takeoff, and Phibes watches from a telescope as Kitai is swarmed by rats. Damn, these little bastards are ravenous. Kitai crashes and burns, and in his rush back, Shenley unknowingly totals the superintendent's vehicle. Cheers to another successful murder. Trout, Shenley, and another inspector named Crow all convene to protect Dr. Wickham, but this poor fucker gets an unusually quick death via a big brass unicorn being yeeted into him. Phibes watches a slideshow of Victoria as he spews some poetry to her, and he declares that his work will be complete in 24 hours and he'll be able to join her in heaven.
We shall be reunited forever.
Phibes, what the fuck are you doing with those Brussels sprouts? And Volnavia, what the fuck is your deal? You have not said a single word this entire film, Missy. Aside from Vesalius, the final target is Nurse Allen, whose hospital is being completely surrounded by officers. Too bad Phibes is already in the building. They lock her up in some guarded sleeping quarters, but Phibes takes an aerial approach from the floor above. He drills a goddamn hole into the floor right above Allen, who is conveniently knocked out thanks to some sleeping pills she took. He douses the woman in Brussels sprout concentrate, which is bad enough on its own, but the reason why is even grosser. Jesus lady, I need to borrow your prescription sometime. Turns out locusts fucking love Brussels sprouts, so Phibes has turned Nurse Allen into an all-you-can-eat buffet. It has just occurred to Trout that Vesalius' son Lem could be the target for the death of the firstborn, and yeah, in their distraction, poor little Lem has been kidnapped. They rush back to the hospital to find that Nurse Allen has been turned into bug chow. Wow, those things were hungry. Damn, now Phibes is prank calling Vesalius. This man is a menace.
Hello. Who's there?
He tells Vesalius where he is located and gives him until midnight to arrive alone if he wants to save Lem. The doctor wants to go alone, but Trout insists that the police come as well, but Vesalius knocks the inspector out when he isn't looking. Yes, Volnavia, slay! I'm sure this has some kind of symbolic purpose, but I couldn't tell you what it is. Vesalius arrives and tries to trade himself for Lem, but Phibes refuses. He blames Vesalius and all of the others for Victoria's death, and apparently distrusts all doctors now because they claimed he would never talk again. He wants to test Vesalius' surgical skill on his own son, who is revealed to be strapped down on an operating table. Vesalius has just accepted this as his reality, I suppose, and heads downstairs, and Trout awakens and heads towards Phibes. The maniac has implanted a key near Lem's heart, which will unlock the halter holding Lem to the table. If Vesalius can't complete the task in 6 minutes, a slow flow of acid will melt the poor kid's face. The doctor gets to work cutting open his son, and Phibes heads downstairs to get a closer look.
Cry upon God, Dr. Vesalius. He is on my side.
Don't fuck with me! I have the power of God and anime on my side! Wait,
He starts talking shit to the surgeon, reminding him that his wife was only on the operating table 6 minutes before dying. He sends Volnavia to destroy all of his earthly belongings, who of course decides to do it with a golden axe. Phibes warns Vesalius to work quickly, or else Lem will wind up having a face like his. Okay, bye! Volnavia gets to chopping and Phibes gets to tapping, and the police finally show up. Vesalius manages to remove the key and opens the lock, narrowly saving Lem. Volnavia isn't so lucky, as the officers chase her downstairs right into the acid shower. They use the organ to descend into the basement, where Phibes has put his face back on. He lies down in a giant sarcophagus with Victoria's corpse, and he uses a machine to replace his blood with embalming fluid. The lid descends down to cover the lovers as the boys make their way in. Unable to find Phibes, they recall that the final curse was darkness to end the movie. And that's the Abominable Dr. Phibes! This one is a lot of fun, but first and foremost, this movie is just fucking bizarre. We've got the animatronic band, Valnavia's beautiful psychotic ass, Phibes drinking through his neck and speaking through a robot voice, the goofy ass cops, and of course all of the downright ridiculous ways that the surgeons are being killed. The visuals are stunning, especially when we're in Phibes' hideout. And generally, I would say this is way more of a visual and audio-based experience as opposed to really emphasizing the narrative. There's obviously a story happening, but the film takes a pretty ambiguous approach to explaining all the ins and outs of Phibes and his revenge plan. But I don't mean that strictly as a critique, as one of the first movies I thought to compare this to is Suspiria, as it's another film that you can really just get sucked into. But amidst the great visuals is also a compelling story that is slowly being revealed to us, and behind all the goofy animals and police nonsense, there is a sorrowful core to this movie. While murdering 9 people for what at the very worst could have been medical malpractice is a huge overreaction, it is a motive that we the audience can understand, if not empathize with. Those moments where he's speaking to Victoria are genuinely beautiful and sad, and help to anchor what could have been just a dumb fun horror flick. I wouldn't say it's my favorite Vincent Price performance due to the simple fact his voice and facial expressions are really limited here, but even through his modulated voice and body language he gives a great performance. Joseph Cotten gives a great performance as well, as do all of the other side characters. Peter Jeffrey adds a lot of great humor as the dim-witted detective. And I also need to mention just how funny this film is. It's about as black comedy can get, and it's so mundane and monotone you could totally miss the jokes if you aren't paying total attention. My only real complaint is that the doctors being killed all feel pretty impersonal and interchangeable. I don't expect every kill to be a punch in the gut emotionally, but it just gets pretty repetitive with back-to-back-to-back kills and investigations for people we don't really care about. Each kill is fantastic though, so that helped to keep my interest despite the repetition. All in all though, I think the Abominable Dr. Phibes is a great mishmash of a lot of things. It's a gothic, art deco, revenge-based proto-slasher that manages to be effectively philosophical, campy, and brutal. It has clearly been an inspiration on films like Saw and Seven with its convoluted, religiously themed murder devices, and I'd be shocked if its visual style didn't have subtle influence on a bunch of films like Phantom of the Paradise. The violence is a bit tame and the pacing is a bit slow by today's standards, but I really enjoyed being able to soak up the subtle humor and absurd kills in this really unique film. I'd say it's definitely worth a watch if you've never seen it before. Well, that's about it. What do y'all think of the Abominable Dr. Phibes? Is the sequel worth checking out? Let me know down below. Thank you again to my patron Nitpicks for requesting this for me to review. This was a lot of fun to learn about and share my newfound knowledge on. Be sure to join me again in 2 weeks when we check out another mystery patron request. Thank you all so much for joining me, and an extra thank you to my patrons. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and thanks for watching Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching my review of the Abominable Dr. Phibes. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all my horror reviews, and if you want to help support this channel further, you should check out my Patreon account. You'll be able to vote for future movies and franchises I cover on the channel. Thanks y'all.